I was fixing her fence when she asked me the question that changed everything. Would you marry me, even if I'm 52? I'm serious this time. That's all it was supposed to be. A simple fence repair. But sometimes life has other plans, and sometimes those plans involve a woman named Donna, who makes the best strawberry lemonade in 3 counties, and isn't afraid to ask the questions that most people spend their whole lives avoiding. The morning started like every other Tuesday in my 38 years of existence. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My alarm went off at 6:15 a.m., which I promptly ignored until 6:32 because apparently I'm committed to starting each day with a small act of rebellion against my own best interests. The coffee maker gurgled to life. One of those automatic ones that my sister Jenny got me for Christmas 2 years ago, insisting that, "Josh, you can't keep drinking gas station coffee forever. It's basically motor oil with caffeine." She wasn't wrong, but old habits die hard, especially when you've been living alone for 3 years and your idea of meal planning involves checking if the Chinese takeout place delivers past midnight. I sat at my kitchen table, which doubles as my office desk and occasionally my dining room table when I'm feeling fancy, scrolling through my phone while nursing what Jenny would definitely classify as motor oil with caffeine. 3 missed calls from my mother, which meant either someone was dead, getting married, or she'd discovered another conspiracy theory about why I'm still single at 38. Given that it was Tuesday morning, I was betting on option 3. 1 text from my business partner, Carl. "Riverside job canceled. You free for Maplewood today? Lady needs fence fixed ASAP, pays cash." Carl runs our small handyman business with the efficiency of a military operation and the communication skills of a telegraph operator. Everything is urgent, everyone pays cash, and somehow we stay busy enough to keep the lights on and my truck running. The voicemail from my mother was exactly what I expected. "Joshua Michael, I ran into Mrs. Henderson at the grocery store, and she mentioned that her daughter Sonia is back in town. You remember Sonia, don't you? She was homecoming queen. Went to dental school. Has her own practice now. Very successful. Very single. I told her you'd call her. Her number hasn't changed. You should call her. Tonight. Before someone else does." I deleted the message and made a mental note to have yet another conversation with my mother about boundaries. At 38, I've learned that the secret to maintaining a good relationship with your parents is loving them dearly while completely ignoring about 60% of their advice. Donna Kellerman. That was the name on Carl's hastily scribbled note when I swung by his place to pick up the work order. "Big house on Sycamore Lane," he said, loading fence posts into my truck bed. "Widow. Moved in about 6 months ago. Storm knocked down half her back fence last week, and apparently the HOA is breathing down her neck about property standards." "What's she like?" I asked, more out of professional curiosity than personal interest. "Some clients hover, some disappear entirely, and some offer you lemonade and life advice in equal measure. It helps to know what you're walking into." Carl shrugged. "Didn't talk to her directly. Her neighbor Jeffrey called it in. Said she's nice enough, keeps to herself mostly, but the fence thing has got her stressed out. Something about her late husband being the handy one, and she's still figuring out how to handle this stuff." I nodded, loading my toolbox. I'd been doing this long enough to recognize the pattern. New widow, overwhelming house maintenance, well-meaning neighbors stepping in to help. Usually straightforward work, usually pleasant people, and usually a story or two about the husband who used to handle these things. As I drove through town towards Sycamore Lane, I found myself thinking about patterns. My life had fallen into a comfortable routine over the past few years. Wake up, work, eat something that Jenny would disapprove of, watch Netflix until my eyes got tired, sleep, repeat. It wasn't exciting, but it was predictable. And after the chaos of my divorce 3 years ago, predictable felt like a luxury. Linda and I had been married for 5 years, together for 8, and I thought we had it all figured out. Turns out, she had it figured out differently than I did, which she explained to me over dinner at the Olive Garden on a Thursday night in March. "Josh, I love you, but I don't think we want the same things anymore. Maybe we never did." She was right, of course, but that didn't make it hurt any less when she moved out the following weekend. Since then, I'd been on exactly 4 dates, all arranged by well-meaning friends or family members who seemed to think that being divorced was some kind of medical condition that could be cured by exposure to the right woman. The dates were fine. The women were nice, but nothing clicked. Nothing sparked. And I'd started to wonder if maybe I was just meant to be one of those guys who focuses on work and takes care of his mother and calls it a life. Sycamore Lane turned out to be one of those tree-lined streets, where every house looks like it was designed by someone who believed that front porches and flower gardens could solve most of the world's problems. The address Carl had given me led to a 2-story colonial painted soft yellow with white trim, the kind of house that belongs on a postcard advertising small-town America. The front yard was immaculate. Roses blooming in neat beds, a pathway, lined with hostas, and a garden that looked like someone actually knew what they were doing. The only thing out of place was the woman standing in the middle of it all, hands on her hips, staring at a sprinkler that was shooting water in every direction except where it was supposed to go. She was maybe early 50s, shoulder-length auburn, hair shot through with just enough silver to catch the morning light, wearing jeans that had clearly seen actual work, and a t-shirt that read, "I'm not arguing, I'm just explaining why I'm right." When she heard my truck pull into the driveway, she looked up with an expression that was equal parts frustration and amusement. "Please tell me you're Josh," she called out. "Because if you're here to sell me something or save my soul, I should warn you that I'm currently in a committed relationship with chaos, and it's winning." I laughed, grabbing my toolbox from the truck bed. "I'm Josh, and I'm just here to fix your fence. Though if you need someone to negotiate a peace treaty with that sprinkler, I might be able to help with that too." She smiled, and something about it made me think that this job might be a little different from the usual routine. "I'm Donna," she said, walking over to shake my hand. "And that sprinkler has been plotting against me for 3 days now. I swear it knows I don't understand how it works." Her handshake was firm, her hands warm and slightly rough in a way that suggested she wasn't afraid of actual work. There was something immediately comfortable about her, like talking to an old friend you hadn't seen in a while. "Well, Donna," I said, "let's start with the fence, and then maybe we can declare war on the sprinkler together." She laughed again, and I found myself thinking that this Tuesday was already shaping up to be more interesting than most. The fence turned out to be worse than Carl had described. What he'd called storm damage looked more like nature had declared personal war on Donna's backyard. 3 sections completely down, posts tilted at angles that defied physics, and chicken wire that had somehow wrapped itself around a bird feeder, like it was auditioning for modern art. "I know it looks bad," Donna said, following me through the gate. "My husband Tom used to handle all this stuff. He had this whole system, measurements and levels and tools I couldn't even pronounce. Me? I'm more of a, if it's broken, hit it with something until it works kind of person." She said it with a laugh, but I caught the slight hesitation when she mentioned her husband, the way her voice softened just a fraction, like his name still felt unfamiliar in past tense. "How long has it been?" I asked, crouching down to examine one of the damaged posts. Sometimes people want to talk about it. Sometimes they don't. But I've learned that ignoring the elephant in the room just makes everyone uncomfortable. 8 months, she said. Heart attack. Completely out of nowhere. One day he's arguing with the neighbor about property lines. The next day he's gone. She paused, watching me work. "You know what the weirdest part is? I keep waiting for him to come home and fix things. Not because I can't do it myself, but because that was his thing. He loved projects like this." I nodded, continuing my assessment. My dad was the same way. Every weekend was some new home improvement adventure. My mother used to joke that he was slowly rebuilding the entire house 1 room at a time. Used to? Stroke 2 years ago. Mom's been trying to convince me to take over his workshop ever since. But I keep telling her I inherited his stubbornness, not his organizational skills. Donna laughed. A real one this time. God, the workshop. Tom's is still exactly how he left it. I keep meaning to clean it out, but every time I go in there, I just stand around touching his tools like they're going to tell me secrets. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. There was something refreshing about her honesty. No forced cheerfulness, no apologizing for bringing up heavy topics. Just straightforward truth delivered with enough humor to keep it from drowning you. All right, I said, standing up and dusting off my hands. The good news is, this is definitely fixable. The bad news is, it's going to take most of the day. Maybe longer if that sprinkler decides to join the fight. About the sprinkler, she said, grinning. I may have kicked it. Twice. Yesterday I caught myself having a full conversation with it about water pressure and civic responsibility. Did it respond? It laughed at me. I swear I heard it laughing. I walked over to the offending piece of lawn equipment and spent about 30 seconds adjusting the head and tightening a loose connection. Water immediately started flowing in a perfect, gentle arc across the flower bed. Donna stared at it for a full 10 seconds before turning to me with an expression of pure betrayal. You have got to be kidding me. Sometimes they just need someone to listen, I said, trying not to smile. Joshua, she said, hands on her hips. That sprinkler has been broken for 3 days. 3 days of me reading manuals and watching YouTube videos and calling the hardware store. You touched it for 30 seconds. I have magic hands, I said, immediately regretting the phrasing. She raised an eyebrow. Is that what you tell all your clients? Only the ones whose sprinklers have trust issues. She was quiet for a moment, then burst out laughing. You know what? I like you. You're weird, but in a refreshingly honest way. Most people come over here and treat me like I'm made of glass because I'm a widow. You just fixed my sprinkler and made inappropriate jokes about your hands. I aim to please, I said, and also to make sprinkler repair sound vaguely suggestive, apparently. Definitely vaguely, she agreed. Would you like some coffee? I made way too much this morning, and I've been drinking it alone for 8 months. Now, it's starting to feel pathetic. The smart thing would have been to decline, get to work, finish the job, and move on to the next one. But something about Donna made me want to be less smart and more human. Coffee sounds great, I said. Her kitchen was one of those spaces that felt lived in rather than decorated. Mismatched mugs, plants on every windowsill, and a refrigerator covered in photos and grocery lists and what looked like poetry written on sticky notes. She handed me a mug that read, World's Okayest Gardener, and poured coffee that smelled like it could wake the dead. So, she said, settling across from me at a small round table. Tell me about Josh the fence fixer. Married? Kids? Secret addiction? To reality television? Divorced, no kids, and my secret addiction is actually those cooking shows where people make elaborate cakes that look like everyday objects. Ah, a man of sophisticated tastes. Last week I watched someone make a cake. That looked exactly like a toolbox. I was genuinely impressed and slightly disturbed. And the divorce? 3 years ago. Turns out Linda and I had very different ideas about what we wanted from life. She wanted adventure and spontaneity and a husband who didn't consider trying. A new restaurant to be a major life decision. I wanted predictability and someone who appreciated that I remembered to put the toilet seat down 90% of the time. Donna laughed. 90% is pretty impressive, actually. That's what I thought. But apparently, the other 10% was deal-breaker territory. What about now? Dating? Looking for love in all the wrong places? I considered the question while sipping her excellent coffee. Honestly, I've been on autopilot for the past couple years. Work, occasional dinner with family, Netflix, sleep, repeat. It's not exciting, but it's not complicated either. Complicated is exhausting, she agreed. But so is autopilot, after a while. She was right, though I hadn't really thought about it that way before. Autopilot had felt safe, necessary even, after the chaos of divorce. But sitting in Donna's kitchen, drinking excellent coffee, and having the kind of conversation I hadn't had in months, I realized that maybe I'd been playing it too safe for too long. What about you? I asked. Any plans to get back out there? Date again? She was quiet for a moment, staring into her mug. That's complicated, she said finally. I loved Tom. Really loved him. But if I'm being completely honest, we'd been more like roommates than lovers for the past few years. We were comfortable, you know. We had our routines, our separate interests, our polite conversations about grocery lists and lawn care. She looked up at me. Is it terrible that I sometimes wonder if I miss him, or if I just miss having someone around? It's honest, I said. Honesty isn't terrible. Tom would have hated this conversation, she said with a small smile. He wasn't big on examining feelings, or talking about relationships, or really talking about anything that couldn't be solved with a screwdriver and proper measurements. Sounds like he was a good man who wasn't great at emotional maintenance. Exactly. She drained her coffee and stood up. All right, enough deep thoughts for a Tuesday morning. Let's go fix my fence before I start questioning all my other life choices. As we walked back outside, I found myself thinking that this job was definitely not going to be routine. And for the first time in 3 years, that felt like exactly what I needed. The actual fence work went surprisingly smoothly. Donna had this way of anticipating what I needed before I asked for it, holding boards steady while I measured, handing me tools without being asked, making conversation that somehow made the time pass without being distracting. It was like we'd been working together for years instead of hours. You know, she said, watching me align a particularly stubborn post. Tom always made this look so complicated. He'd spend 20 minutes measuring and remeasuring everything. You just seem to know where things go. Experience, I said, hammering the post into place. Also, I've learned that most things don't need to be perfect, just sturdy enough to do their job. Philosophy of fence repair? Philosophy of life, actually. By lunchtime, we'd gotten 2 sections completely rebuilt, and the third one halfway done. Donna disappeared into the house and came back with sandwiches that looked like they belonged in a magazine, and a pitcher of what she called her famous strawberry lemonade. Famous how? I asked, settling onto her back porch steps. Among Tom's poker buddies. Every summer barbecue, they'd show up early just to get first dibs on the lemonade. I used to make gallons of it. She poured 2 glasses, handing me one. Haven't made it since he died. Seemed pointless to make a whole pitcher just for me. I took a sip and understood immediately why Tom's friends showed up early. It was the perfect balance of sweet and tart, with real strawberry pieces floating at the bottom and a hint of something I couldn't quite identify. What's the secret ingredient? I asked. Basil, she said with a grin. Just a tiny bit. Most people can't pinpoint it, but it makes all the difference. It's incredible. Thanks. It was actually my grandmother's recipe. She taught me when I was 12, said every woman should have at least one thing she makes better than anyone else in 3 counties. We ate in comfortable silence for a while, listening to birds and the distant sound of someone mowing their lawn. It was one of those perfect early summer days where the air smells like grass and possibility, and I found myself wondering when I'd last taken time to just sit and notice things like that. Can I ask you something? Donna said suddenly. Sure. She was looking out at her yard, not at me, and I could see her gathering courage for something. Do you think it's possible for someone to be perfectly content with their life and still feel like they're only living half of it? The question caught me off guard. What do you mean, I mean? She paused, choosing her words carefully. I loved my marriage. I loved Tom. But looking back, I think we both settled into being safe rather than being happy. We stopped challenging each other, stopped growing. We were like 2 people who agreed to share a house and split the bills and call it love. I thought about Linda, about our polite dinners and separate hobbies and the way we'd stopped really seeing each other somewhere along the way. Yeah, I said quietly. I think I know exactly what you mean. The thing is, she continued, I'm 52 years old. Tom and I were together for 26 years. That's more than half my life. And now I'm sitting here wondering if I even know who I am when I'm not part of a couple. Are you figuring it out? She laughed, but it wasn't entirely happy. Some days I feel like I'm finally becoming myself. Other days I feel like I'm just an echo of who I used to be before I got married. And then there are days when I wonder if it's too late to become someone completely new. I set down my sandwich, suddenly understanding that we weren't having casual lunch conversation anymore. This was something deeper, more important. Donna, I said, can I tell you something? In the 3 hours I've known you, you've been more yourself than most people are in their whole lives. You're funny and honest and kind, and you make incredible lemonade. If that's an echo, I'd love to meet the original. She looked at me then, really looked, and I saw something in her eyes that made my chest tight. Vulnerability, maybe, or hope, or both. You want to know the truth? She said softly. The really embarrassing truth? Try me. I've been thinking about dating again. Not because I'm lonely. Well, not just because I'm lonely. But because I want to know if I can still feel that flutter, you know? That nervous excitement when someone new smiles at you. The way your heart speeds up when you wonder if they're going to kiss you. She was blushing now, but she didn't look away. I want to know if I can still be someone's first choice instead of their comfortable option. My heart was definitely speeding up, but I tried to keep my voice steady. I think any man would be lucky to be chosen by you. Really? She leaned forward slightly. Even if I'm 52? Even if I have crow's feet and stretch marks and opinions about everything? Even if I cry at commercials and sing off key in the shower and sometimes eat ice cream for breakfast? Especially if you eat ice cream for breakfast, I said. That shows excellent judgment. She laughed, and the sound was lighter than it had been all day. You know what the scary part is? What? I think I might be ready to find out. About the flutter, I mean. About whether someone could choose me. The air between us had gotten thick, with something I couldn't name. Not quite flirtation, not quite friendship. Something new and uncertain and terrifying in the best possible way. Donna, I said carefully, are you asking me what I think you're asking me? She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. When she looked up, her expression was serious in a way that made everything else fade into background noise. Would you marry me? She said quietly. Even if I'm 52? I'm serious this time. The world stopped. Not in a metaphorical way, it actually felt like everything around us froze. The birds, the distant lawnmower, the breeze that had been rustling the leaves. Everything went silent except for the sound of my own heartbeat hammering in my ears. I stared at her, sandwich forgotten, lemonade growing warm in my hand. Donna, I know how it sounds, she said quickly. I know we just met. I know this is crazy. But there's something about you, Josh. Something that makes me feel like myself again. Like maybe I could be someone's first choice. You don't even know me, I said, though even as I said it, it felt wrong. Like maybe she knew me better than people I'd known for years. I know you fix sprinklers without being asked, she said. I know you listen when people talk about their dead husbands without trying to change the subject. I know you make me laugh, and I haven't really laughed in 8 months. She took a breath. I know this is insane, but I also know that I've spent the last 26 years playing it safe, and where did that get me? Sitting alone in a house that's too big, talking to sprinklers and missing conversations I never even had. Donna, I'm not asking you to marry me tomorrow, she said. I'm asking if you think it's possible. If someone like you could ever choose someone like me. If the idea of building something new with someone who eats ice cream for breakfast is completely ridiculous, or just mostly ridiculous. I looked at her sitting there on her back porch, surrounded by strawberry lemonade and fence posts and the kind of courage I hadn't seen in years. Her hair was catching the afternoon light. Her cheeks were flushed with embarrassment and hope, and she was waiting for an answer to the bravest question I'd ever heard. It depends, I said finally. On what? On whether you're willing to teach me how to make that lemonade, I said. Because if we're going to do this, I need to know all your secrets. The smile that spread across her face was worth every moment of terror that had come before it. The rest of the afternoon passed in a strange, comfortable haze. We finished the fence, but the conversation from lunch hung between us like electricity before a storm. Donna seemed lighter somehow, like asking the impossible question had lifted some invisible weight from her shoulders. I felt the opposite, like I'd been handed something precious and fragile that I had no idea how to hold. By 5 o'clock, the fence stood straight and sturdy, looking like it had been there for years instead of hours. Donna walked the length of it, running her hand along the top rail with the satisfaction of someone seeing a problem finally solved. It's perfect, she said. Tom would have been proud. Good, I said, packing up my tools. It should last another 20 years, easy. 20 years, she repeated thoughtfully. That's a long time. Before I could figure out how to respond to that, a voice called out from the neighboring yard. Donna, how's the fence coming along? A man appeared at the property line, mid-60s, wearing a gardening apron and carrying a trowel like it was a surgeon's scalpel. This had to be Jeffrey, the neighbor who'd called in the job. "Jeffrey, meet Josh," Donna said. "Josh, this is Jeffrey Morrison, my neighbor and unofficial HOA compliance officer." Jeffrey wiped his hands on his apron and extended one over the fence. "Pleasure to meet you, son. That's fine work you've done here. Much better than that outfit. Donna called last month." "Last month?" I looked at Donna, who suddenly seemed very interested in examining the fence posts. "Don't ask," she said. "It involved a man named Chuck, 3 broken posts, and what I'm pretty sure was a homemade measuring stick." Jeffrey laughed. "Chuck measured everything with his forearm. Claimed it was an ancient building technique. Problem was, Chuck had unusually short arms." "How unusual are we talking?" I asked. "Let's just say the fence looked like it was designed by someone who'd only heard fences described secondhand," Donna said. "It was art," Jeffrey added. "Terrible, crooked art." As if summoned by the sound of laughter, another neighbor appeared. This one was a woman about Donna's age, with short blonde hair and the kind of confident stride that suggested she was used to being in charge of things. Well, she said, approaching with a smile that somehow managed to be both friendly and calculating. "This must be the miracle worker I've been hearing about. Josh, meet Maxine Porter," Donna said. "Maxine lives 2 houses down and knows everything about everyone on this street." "It's a gift," Maxine said, shaking my hand with the grip of someone who'd made handshakes into an art form. "Also a curse, depending on your perspective." "Maxine ran the PTA for 15 years, Jeffrey explained. "She's basically trained in information gathering." "Intelligence gathering," Maxine corrected. "There's a difference." I was starting to understand that Sycamore Lane was one of those neighborhoods where everyone knew everyone, and privacy was more of a theoretical concept than a practical reality. "So," Maxine said, settling in like she planned to stay a while, "Jeffrey tells me you're single, Josh." "Maxine," Donna warned. "What?" "I'm just making conversation. Besides, I have a daughter who's recently divorced. Very successful. Works in marketing." "Your daughter lives in Seattle," Jeffrey pointed out. "Distance is just a number," Maxine replied. "Besides, she visits every Christmas." I caught Donna's eye and saw something there that made my chest tighten. Not jealousy exactly, but something close to it. Like the idea of me being matched up with someone else's daughter didn't sit quite right with her. "Actually," I said carefully, "I'm not really looking to be set up right now." "Oh, that's what they all say," Maxine laughed. "Right up until they meet the right person. Sometimes the right person finds you when you're not looking," Donna said quietly. There was a moment of silence where I was pretty sure everyone on the block could hear my heart beating. "Well," Jeffrey said, clearly sensing the undercurrent, "I should get back to my tomatoes. They don't stake themselves." "And I should start dinner," Maxine added, but not before giving me a look that suggested she'd filed away every detail of this conversation for future analysis. After they left, Donna and I stood alone in her backyard, surrounded by the evidence of a day well spent and a conversation that had changed everything. "They seem nice," I said. "They are. They're also the neighborhood early warning system. By tomorrow morning, everyone on this street will know that the fence repairman stayed late and made me smile more than I have in months." "Is that a problem?" She considered this. 8 months ago, I would have said yes. I would have worried about what people thought, about whether I was moving too fast or being inappropriate or dishonoring Tom's memory. And now? Now I think maybe I'm tired of living my life according to other people's timetables. I finished, loading my truck, very aware that leaving felt like ending something important before it had really begun. But I also knew that rushing would ruin whatever this was becoming. "Donna," I said, leaning against my truck. "About what you asked earlier." "You don't have to answer now," she said quickly. "I know it was crazy. I know we just met." "It was crazy," I agreed. "But crazy doesn't always mean wrong." She looked at me with that same hopeful vulnerability that had knocked me sideways during lunch. "I'd like to see you again," I said. "Not for fence repair, just to see you." "I'd like that too. Tomorrow night? Dinner?" "Only if you let me cook," she said. "I make a mean pasta sauce." "Deal, but I'm bringing wine. Red or white? What goes with strawberry lemonade?" She laughed, and the sound made me think that maybe, just maybe, I was about to discover what it felt like to be someone's first choice. I showed up at Donna's house the next evening with a bottle of red wine and the kind of nervous energy I hadn't felt since high school. I'd changed clothes 3 times, which seemed ridiculous for a man pushing 40. But everything felt different now. This wasn't just dinner. This was the beginning of something that could either be wonderful or completely devastating. Donna answered the door wearing a blue sundress that made her eyes look like summer sky, and I forgot whatever witty opening line I'd rehearsed during the drive over. "You clean up nice," she said, taking the wine and standing aside to let me in. "You look—" I paused, trying to find words that wouldn't sound like a greeting card. "You look like someone I'd definitely want to marry." She laughed, the kind of full-body laugh that made her whole face light up. "Smooth, Josh. Very smooth." "I've been practicing that line all day. It shows." Her house smelled like garlic and herbs and something else I couldn't identify but wanted to bottle and keep forever. She led me to the kitchen, where I could see she'd been busy. Fresh pasta hanging on a wooden rack, sauce simmering on the stove, and a salad that looked like it belonged in a restaurant. "This is incredible," I said. "You didn't have to go to all this trouble." "Trouble?" She handed me a corkscrew. "Josh, I haven't cooked for anyone but myself in 8 months. This isn't trouble, it's therapy." As I opened the wine, she told me about her day. How Jeffrey had stopped by to compliment the fence again. How Maxine had called with a suspicious number of questions about my marital status and career prospects. And how she'd spent an embarrassing amount of time deciding what to wear. "What did you tell Maxine?" I asked. "That you were mysteriously handsome and probably too good to be true," she said, stirring the sauce. "She immediately wanted to know if you had any brothers." "Just one sister, Jenny. She's married to a guy who collects vintage lunchboxes. That's either charming or concerning. Little bit of both, honestly." We fell into an easy rhythm, me setting the table, her putting finishing touches on dinner, both of us dancing around the elephant in the room that was yesterday's conversation. But it was a comfortable kind of avoidance, like we both knew we needed to just be normal people. Having dinner before we could be whatever we were becoming. The pasta was perfect. Not just good, perfect. The kind of meal that makes you understand why people write love songs about food. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" I asked. "Tom's mother," she said. She was convinced that the way to keep a man happy was through elaborate meals and spotless laundry. Took me years to realize that was only true if you're trying to keep the wrong kind of man. What kind of man was Tom? She was quiet for a moment, twirling pasta around her fork. "Good. Decent. Reliable. He paid the bills on time and remembered anniversaries and never left dirty dishes in the sink." She paused. "But he also never asked me what I dreamed about. Never wondered what I thought about when I was quiet. We lived parallel lives in the same house. That sounds lonely. It was. But it was also safe, you know? No surprises, no disappointments. No one asking me to be more than I was. And now?" She looked at me across the table, and I saw something in her expression that made my chest tight. "Now I think maybe I want someone to ask me to be more than I am." After dinner, we moved to her living room with the wine. The space was comfortable, without being precious. Lived-in furniture, books everywhere, and photos that told the story of a life well lived. I found myself studying the pictures while she made coffee. "That's us in Italy," she said, coming back with 2 mugs and noticing where I was looking. "Our 20th anniversary. Tom wanted to see the Roman ruins. I wanted to eat gelato and buy too many scarves. Did you compromise?" We did both. He humored my shopping addiction. I pretended to care about ancient architecture. Though I have to admit, the Colosseum was pretty spectacular. She settled beside me on the couch, close enough that I could smell her perfume, something light and floral that made me think of spring mornings. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Anything. Yesterday, when I asked you about marriage, what was your first thought? Before you made that joke about the lemonade recipe." I considered lying, giving her something easy and comfortable, but she'd been brave enough to ask the impossible question in the first place. Honestly, my first thought was yes, which terrified me. Why? Because I've known you for one day, and you already make me want to be a better version of myself. That's either the beginning of something amazing or the setup for a spectacular disaster. Which do you think it is? I think, I said carefully, that I've spent the last 3 years playing it safe. And safe got me exactly nowhere. Maybe it's time to try spectacular. She was quiet for a long moment, staring into her coffee. When she looked up, her eyes were bright with something that might have been tears or might have been hope. Josh? Yeah? I think I'm falling for you, and that scares me more than asking you to marry me did. Why? Because the marriage question was theoretical. This feels real. I set down my coffee and turned to face her fully. Donna, can I tell you something? Please. I think I've been waiting my whole life for someone to ask me the kind of questions you ask. Not about what I do or what I want to accomplish, but about who I am when nobody's looking. And who are you when nobody's looking? Someone who wants to deserve you, I said. She leaned forward then, slowly, giving me every chance to pull away. When her lips touched mine, it was soft and tentative and perfect, like coming home to a place I'd never been before. When we broke apart, she rested, her forehead against mine. So, she whispered, is this the part where we pretend this is casual? Is that what you want? No, she said. I'm 52 years old, Josh. I don't have time for casual. Good, I said, because I'm pretty sure I'm already in love with you. Pretty. Sure? Completely sure. Absolutely, terrifyingly sure. She smiled and kissed me again, and I thought that maybe spectacular disasters weren't always disasters after all. The next 3 weeks fell into a pattern that felt dangerously close to perfect. I'd finish work and drive to Sycamore Lane where Donna would be waiting with dinner plans or garden projects or sometimes just the desire to sit on her back porch and talk until the fireflies came out. We were careful not to move too fast physically, but emotionally we were falling at a speed that should have terrified me. It didn't. For the first time in my adult life, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be, which is probably why the universe decided to test us. It started with a phone call on a Thursday evening. Donna and I were in her kitchen, attempting to make homemade pizza and failing spectacularly when her landline rang. She glanced at the caller ID and froze. Who is it? I asked, noting the sudden tension in her shoulders. Tom's brother, she said quietly. Martin. I haven't heard from him. Since the funeral, she answered with a cautious hello, and I watched her face change as the conversation progressed. Her initial wariness shifted to confusion, then to something that looked like fear. What do you mean, lawsuit? She said, gripping the phone tighter. Martin, slow down. What lawsuit? I turned off the oven and moved closer, concerned by the way she'd gone pale. Tomorrow? She was saying. No, I haven't received any papers. Are you sure they have the right address? The conversation lasted another 10 minutes, with Donna asking increasingly worried questions and getting answers that clearly weren't making her feel better. When she finally hung up, she stood staring at the phone like it might ring again with better news. What's going on? I asked gently. Apparently Tom's business partner is suing his estate, she said, sinking into a kitchen chair. Martin says there's some dispute over money that Tom supposedly borrowed before he died. David, that's the partner, claims Tom took $40,000 from their business account for personal use. Did he? I don't know. She looked up at me with a kind of helpless confusion that breaks your heart. Tom handled all our finances. I trusted him completely. He said I didn't need to worry about money stuff, that it wasn't my strong suit. The familiar anger at absent husbands who kept their wives in the dark about finances rose in my chest, but I pushed it down. This wasn't the time for commentary on Tom's paternalistic attitude toward money management. Have you talked to a lawyer? I asked. Tom's lawyer died last year. I don't even know where to start. We'll figure it out, I said automatically, then caught myself. I mean, you'll figure it out. Sorry, I didn't mean to assume. No, she said, reaching for my hand. I like the we. I'm just not sure I have any right to drag you into this mess. You're not dragging me anywhere. I'm volunteering. The next morning, I called my sister Jenny, who worked as a paralegal for a firm that handled estate disputes. She gave me the name of a lawyer named Sandra Walsh, who agreed to see Donna that afternoon. I offered to drive, and Donna accepted, with a gratitude that made me realize how long she'd been handling difficult things alone. Sandra Walsh turned out to be a woman in her early 60s, with the kind of no-nonsense attitude that made you immediately feel like your problems might actually be solvable. She listened to Donna's story without interruption, taking notes and asking pointed questions about Tom's business and their financial arrangements. "The good news," Sandra said finally, "is that even if Tom did take this money, you're not automatically liable for business debts unless you personally guaranteed them." "The bad news?" Donna asked. "The bad news is that David Morrison, yes, I know him, he's represented by a firm I've dealt with before, is claiming that you knew about the financial irregularities and benefited from them. He's essentially saying you were complicit." "That's ridiculous," I said. "Donna didn't even know about their business accounts." Sandra looked at me with raised eyebrows. "And you are?" "Josh," I said. I paused, realizing I didn't actually know how to finish that sentence. "He's my boyfriend," Donna said firmly. "And he's right. I had no idea what Tom was doing with the business money." Sandra nodded. "Unfortunately, what we know to be true and what we can prove in court are sometimes different things. David is claiming that certain purchases made to your home and personal accounts suggest you were aware of where the money was coming from." "What purchases?" Donna asked. Sandra consulted her notes. "New roof last spring. Kitchen renovation 2 years ago. A car purchase. Together they total just over $40,000. Donna went very still. "Those were all things Tom said we'd saved for. He showed me statements, said we had money set aside." "Do you still have those statements?" "I think so. Maybe. I haven't looked at the financial papers since he died." As we left Sandra's office, Donna was quieter than I'd ever seen her. She'd gone from confident woman building a new life to confused widow questioning everything she thought she knew about her marriage. "Hey," I said, stopping her before we got to my truck. "This doesn't change anything between us, doesn't it?" She looked at me with eyes that had lost some of their brightness. "Josh, what if I'm not who I thought I was? What if I was living off stolen money and was too naive to realize it?" "Then you were naive, not criminal. There's a difference. Is there? God, how stupid am I? What kind of wife doesn't know what her husband does with their money?" "The kind who trusted him," I said. "That's not stupid, Donna. That's normal. Normal wives don't get sued for $40,000 they didn't know they had." I wanted to argue with her, to convince her that this would all work out fine. But the truth was, I had no idea if it would. What I did know was that I wasn't going anywhere. "Donna," I said, "look at me." She did, reluctantly. 3 weeks ago, you asked me if I would marry you even though you're 52. Today I'm telling you that I'd marry you even if you're 52 and potentially bankrupt. Even if you're 52 and have to sell your house. Even if you're 52 and come with legal problems you didn't create. "Josh, I'm not going anywhere," I said. "Whatever this is, we'll handle it together." For the first time that day, she smiled. It was small and uncertain, but it was real. "You might regret saying that," she said. "Let me worry about my own regrets." That night we sat in her living room surrounded by boxes of financial documents, trying to make sense of Tom's record-keeping system. It wasn't romantic, it wasn't fun, but it was real, and it was ours. And I realized that this was what partnership actually looked like. Not just sharing the good times, but sitting on the floor at midnight, squinting at bank statements and wondering if the man you thought you knew had been lying about everything. "Find anything?" I asked around 11 o'clock. "Just more questions," Donna said, holding up a credit card statement. "But Josh?" "Yeah? Thank you. For staying. For helping. For not running when things got complicated. Thank you for letting me stay. And despite everything, the lawsuit, the financial uncertainty, the growing pile of confusing documents, I meant it completely." The lawsuit papers arrived on a Monday morning via certified mail, making everything suddenly, terrifyingly official. Donna called me at work, her voice shaky in a way I'd never heard before. "Josh, they want the house," she said without preamble. I was in the middle of installing a ceiling fan for Mrs. Chen down the street from Donna's place, but I immediately climbed down from the ladder. What do you mean they want the house? David Morrison's lawyer. They're claiming that since the money Tom allegedly took was used for home improvements, the house is partially owned by their business. They want to force a sale to recover their losses. My stomach dropped. Can they do that? Sandra says maybe. It depends on whether we can prove Tom didn't actually take the money, or if we can show that I had no knowledge of any wrongdoing. Mrs. Chen, who had obviously been listening to my half of the conversation, appeared at my elbow. Problems? She asked in the direct way that made her neighborhood mediations so effective. Legal troubles, I said. My girlfriend's late husband's business partner is suing her. Ah, Mrs. Chen nodded sagely. David Morrison. Slimy little man. Always thought he was smarter than everyone else. I stared at her. You know David Morrison? Everyone knows David Morrison. He tried to convince my Harold to invest in some get-rich-quick scheme 3 years ago. Harold said no, thank goodness. Man has the ethics of a used car salesman. An idea began forming. Mrs. Chen, would you mind if I made a few phone calls? I think we might need to do some community detective work. By that afternoon, I'd organized what Maxine cheerfully dubbed Operation Expose the Weasel. It turned out that half the neighborhood had some kind of story about David Morrison's questionable business practices. Jeffrey remembered him pressuring elderly residents to invest in a development scheme that never materialized. Maxine's ex-husband had been approached about a timeshare deal that sounded suspiciously like a scam. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Jenny, my sister, called me around dinner time with news that made me temporarily forget how to breathe. Josh, you're not going to believe this, she said. I was telling my boss about Donna's situation, and he remembered something. 3 years ago, his firm handled a case against David Morrison for embezzlement. He was stealing from his own company, but the charges were dropped when he paid back the money. Are you serious? Dead serious. And here's the kicker. The embezzlement happened around the same time Tom allegedly took money from their business account. I was standing in Donna's kitchen when I got this call, and she could obviously tell from my expression that something big had happened. I put the phone on speaker. Jenny, this is Donna, she said. Did your boss say anything else about David's case? Just that it was messy, and that David claimed someone else in the company was responsible for the missing funds. He never named names, but… Jenny paused. But the timing suggests he might have been setting Tom up as the fall guy. Setting him up how? I asked. Think about it. David steals money, gets caught, needs a scapegoat. Tom's partner has access to the accounts and conveniently dies before he can defend himself. Donna sank into a kitchen chair. You think David stole money from his own company and blamed Tom after Tom couldn't argue back? It's possible, Jenny said. My boss said David was always good at manipulating financial records to hide his tracks. After we hung up, Donna and I sat in her kitchen, processing this revelation. The same kitchen where we'd laughed over homemade pizza just weeks ago now felt like a war room. If this is true, Donna said slowly, then Tom wasn't lying about our finances. He really had saved for those home improvements. And David Morrison is trying to steal your house to cover up his own crimes, I added. But how do we prove it? That's when Carl, of all people, provided the answer. He'd stopped by to drop off some tools and ended up hearing the whole story. Carl might communicate like a telegraph, but his mind works like a steel trap when it comes to financial details. Bank records, he said simply. Need to compare timestamps. If David moved money around same time Tom supposedly took it, patterns will show. But how do we get David's banking information? Donna asked. Carl smiled, which was slightly terrifying. Have friend at bank. Owes me favor. Can't get account details, but can confirm timing of large transactions. Within 2 days, Carl's banking contact had provided just enough information to establish a pattern. Large withdrawals from the business account followed immediately by deposits into David's personal accounts, all occurring weeks before Tom allegedly accessed any funds. Sandra Walsh was thrilled when we brought her this information. This is exactly what we need, she said, spreading the timeline across her desk. It establishes a clear pattern of David accessing funds first, which supports our theory that he was embezzling and using Tom as cover. Is it enough to get the lawsuit dismissed? Donna asked. It's enough to file a countersuit, Sandra said, with the kind of smile that made me grateful she was on our side. David Morrison opened a very big can of worms when he decided to go after your house. That night, Donna and I celebrated with takeout Chinese food and a bottle of wine that cost more than my usual grocery budget. I can't believe this might actually work out, she said, curled up against me on her couch. It's going to more than work out, I said. By the time Sandra's done with David Morrison, he's going to regret ever hearing Tom's name. You know what the strangest part is? Donna said. What? A month ago, I would have just paid him $40,000 to make the problem go away, even if I had to sell the house to do it. I would have assumed Tom had done something wrong because I never questioned anything he did. And now? Now I know that sometimes the people you trust most are the ones keeping the biggest secrets, and sometimes the people you've known the shortest time are the ones who will fight hardest for you. She looked up at me with eyes that had gotten their brightness back. Thank you for believing in me. For believing Tom wasn't the kind of man who would steal. Thank you for being the kind of woman worth fighting for. Even if I come with lawsuits and financial mysteries? Especially then, I said. Anyone can fall in love during the easy times. It takes something special to build a relationship while investigating embezzlement schemes. She laughed and kissed me, and I realized that we'd passed some kind of test I hadn't even known we were taking. We weren't just people who were attracted to each other anymore. We were partners. We were a team. And David Morrison had no idea what he'd gotten himself into. Just when we thought we had David Morrison cornered, everything fell apart. It started with a phone call from Sandra on a Friday morning. I was at Donna's house, helping her plant new rose bushes where the old fence line used to be, when her phone rang with the kind of urgent tone that makes your stomach drop. Sandra, what's wrong? Donna answered, immediately going into crisis mode. I watched her face change as she listened, going from concerned to confused, to something that looked like devastation. What do you mean the evidence is inadmissible? She said, sinking onto her porch steps. How can bank records be inadmissible? I moved closer, trying to piece together what was happening from Donna's half of the conversation. But Carl's contact confirmed the timing, she was saying. We have proof that David was moving money before Tom ever accessed the accounts. There was a long pause while Sandra explained something that made Donna's shoulders slump. I see, she said quietly. And there's no other way to get this information legally? Another pause. Okay. Yes, I understand. We'll talk Monday. She hung up and sat staring at her phone like it had personally betrayed her. What happened? I asked, settling beside her on the steps. Apparently the bank records Carl's friend provided can't be used in court because they were obtained without proper legal authorization, she said. Sandra says it's called fruit of the poisonous tree, or something like that. Even though the information proves David was lying, we can't use it because of how we got it. But we know the truth now. Can't Sandra get the same information through official channels? She tried. David's lawyer filed an injunction blocking access to his financial records, claiming it's a fishing expedition. And since we no longer have admissible evidence of his wrongdoing, the lawsuit moves forward. The lawsuit moves forward. She leaned back against the porch railing, looking more defeated than I'd ever seen her. Sandra says David's team is pushing for a quick settlement conference. They want this resolved within 2 weeks. What kind of settlement are they talking about? $40,000 or the house? Those are the options. I felt something cold settle in my chest. You don't have $40,000. No, I don't. She was quiet for a moment. Tom left me the house and about $15,000 in savings. Even if I liquidated everything, I couldn't come close to $40,000. So they get the house. They get the house. We sat in silence for a while, watching the neighborhood wake up around us. Jeffrey was watering his tomatoes. Maxine was power walking down the street in bright pink sneakers. And somewhere a lawnmower was starting up. Normal Saturday morning sounds that felt surreal against the backdrop of our crisis. There has to be something else we can do, I said finally. Like what? We had our smoking gun, and it turned out to be legally useless. Sandra's good, but she's not a magician. What if we found another way to prove David was stealing? Josh, we've been over this. All the other evidence is circumstantial. David's too smart to leave obvious tracks. Then what if we make him confess? She looked at me like I'd suggested we rob a bank. Make him confess how? I don't know yet. But there has to be a way. Josh. She turned to face me fully. I appreciate that you want to fix this. I love that you want to fight for me. But sometimes, things just don't work out the way we want them to. So you're giving up? I'm being realistic. Her voice had an edge I'd never heard before. This house is just a house. Yes, it's where I lived with Tom, and yes, it has memories. But it's not worth destroying my future over. What about our future? I asked, immediately regretting how that sounded. What about it? Well, where does this leave us? If you sell the house, where will you go? What will you do? She was quiet for a long time. I don't know, she said finally. I guess I'll figure it out. We'll figure it out, I corrected. Will we? She stood up, starting to pace. Josh, we've been together for 6 weeks. 6 weeks. And already my problems are becoming your problems. My financial disasters are taking over your life. How is that fair to you? I don't care about fair. I care about you. But I care about fair. She stopped pacing and looked at me with something that might have been regret. When I asked you if you'd marry me even if I was 52, I was thinking about age and baggage and whether you could love someone who cries at commercials. I wasn't thinking about lawsuits and financial ruin and having to sell everything I own. None of that changes anything for me. It should. She sat back down, but farther away this time. Josh, you're 38 years old. You have a business, a life, a future ahead of you. You shouldn't have to choose between love and financial stability. I'm not choosing between anything. I'm choosing you. But what if I'm not worth choosing? The question hung between us like a physical thing. For the first time since we'd met, I saw real doubt in her eyes. Not just about the lawsuit or the house, but about herself. About us. Donna, I said carefully, what are you really saying? I'm saying that maybe we moved too fast. Maybe this intensity between us is just crisis bonding or whatever psychologists call it. Maybe when this is all over, we'll realize we don't actually know each other well enough to be making life-altering decisions. Do you believe that? She was quiet for so long I started to think she wasn't going to answer. I don't know what I believe anymore, she said finally. A month ago, I thought I knew who my husband was. I thought I understood my finances. I thought I was building a new life with someone who actually wanted to be with me. Now, I find out, Tom might have been a thief, I'm about to lose my house, and I'm dragging a good man down with me. You're not dragging me anywhere, aren't I? She looked at me with tired eyes. Josh, you've spent the last 2 weeks researching embezzlement law and organizing neighborhood detective operations. When was the last time you worked on your own? Business? When was the last time you had dinner with your family or watched a movie or did anything that wasn't related to my crisis? I started to answer, then realized she was right. I hadn't thought about anything but her problems in weeks. This is what I do, Donna. I fix things, but some things can't be fixed. And some people can't be saved. I don't believe that. Maybe you should. She stood up again, and this time, there was something final in the gesture. I think, she said slowly, maybe you should go home tonight. Give us both some space to think clearly about what we're doing here. Donna, please. I need to figure out how to handle this mess without dragging you down with me. And you need to remember what your life was like before you met a 52-year-old widow with more problems than solutions. I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell her that I didn't want my old life back, that helping her wasn't a burden, that facing problems together was what people who love each other do. But I could see in her face that she'd already made up her mind about something, and I wasn't sure what it was. Is this you breaking up with me? I asked. This is me trying to figure out what's real, she said, and what's just two people clinging to each other in a storm. I stood up, feeling like everything we'd built over the past 6 weeks was crumbling around us. For what it's worth, I said, I know the difference between crisis bonding and love, and this is love. I hope you're right, she said softly. But hope isn't always enough. As I drove home, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just lost more than an argument. I'd lost the woman who'd asked me to marry her on the day we met, and I had no idea how to get her back. I spent the weekend in a haze of stubborn determination and creeping despair. Saturday, I threw myself into work, fixing Mrs. Patterson's back steps, installing new gutters for the Hendersons, anything to keep my hands busy and my mind off Donna's request for space. But every job reminded me of her. A loose fence board made me think of our first day together. A broken sprinkler head brought back the memory of her laughing at my magic hands comment. Sunday was worse. I sat in my apartment, staring at my phone and resisting the urge to call her every 5 minutes. Jenny stopped by around noon with coffee and the kind of concerned expression that meant she'd been talking to our mother. "Mom says you look like someone kicked your dog," she said, settling into my kitchen chair uninvited. "I don't have a dog." "That's not the point, Josh. What happened with Donna?" I told her everything. The inadmissible evidence, the forced settlement, Donna's conviction that she was dragging me down. Jenny listened without interrupting, which was unusual enough to make me realize how serious this was. "So she asked for space," Jenny said when I finished. "She asked for space, and you gave it to her. What else was I supposed to do? Camp out on her porch until she changed her mind?" Jenny was quiet for a moment, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. "Josh, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Do you think she's right about the crisis bonding thing?" The question hit me like a physical blow. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you met her 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks, Josh. And in that time, you've been dealing with lawsuits and embezzlement investigations and financial crises. When exactly did you two have time to just be normal people falling in love?" I stared at her, feeling something cold settle in my stomach. "We had plenty of normal moments." "Name one. One time when you were together and there wasn't some kind of drama or crisis happening." I opened my mouth to answer and found I couldn't. Our first dinner had been interrupted by talk of Tom's death. Our second date had led to the lawsuit revelation. Every interaction since had been colored by David Morrison's threats, or financial stress, or legal meetings. "That doesn't mean what we have isn't real," I said finally. "I'm not saying it isn't. I'm just saying maybe Donna has a point about needing to figure out what's real and what's heightened circumstances. Whose side are you on here?" "Yours, always. Which is why I'm saying this." Jenny leaned forward. "Josh, I've watched you with other women. You're a good guy, you're caring, but you've never been consumed. With Donna, you're consumed. You haven't thought about anything else in weeks because she needed help, or because fixing her problems gave you a sense of purpose you haven't had since Linda left." That stung because it felt partly true. "So, what are you saying? That I'm just playing hero?" "I'm saying maybe you both need to figure out who you are when there isn't a crisis to solve." Meanwhile, according to Maxine, who called me Sunday evening under the pretense of asking about gutter installation, Donna was having her own dark weekend. "She's been in her garden all day," Maxine reported, "pulling weeds like they personally offended her. And she's been crying. I can tell because she keeps wiping her face with those gardening gloves, leaving dirt streaks." "Is she okay?" "Oh, honey, none of us are okay when we're pulling weeds while crying. That's therapeutic gardening 101. "Should I?" "No," Maxine said, firmly. "You should not go over there. Whatever's happening between you two, rushing back before she's ready will only make it worse." "How do you know?" "Because I've been married 3 times, Josh. I'm an expert in relationship disasters." Monday morning brought unexpected news. Carl showed up at my apartment at 7 a.m., which was unusual since he's more of a text and grunt communicator. "Have idea," he said without preamble. "About David Morrison." "Carl, it's over. The evidence. It isn't usable. Not about evidence. About confession." He handed me a business card for someone named Marcus Webb, private investigator. "Friend of mine," Carl explained. "Does insurance fraud mostly. Says David Morrison type always has other victims. Just need to find them." "What do you mean?" "Mean, if David's stealing from Tom, probably stealing from others. Find the others. They help build case." I stared at the card. "Carl, this could take weeks, maybe months. And even if we found other victims." "Donna loves you," Carl said simply. "Obvious to everyone. She's just scared. How do you know that? Because she asked Jeffrey about you yesterday. Asked if you seem different. Sad. She's been asking about me? Course she has. Woman doesn't ask man to marry her unless she means it. She's just afraid of being burden. He turned to leave, then paused. You love her? Yes. Then fight for her. But smart this time. Don't just charge in trying to fix everything. Figure out what she actually needs. After he left, I sat holding Marcus Webb's business card and thinking about what Jenny had said, what Carl had said, what Donna herself had said. Maybe they were all right. Maybe I had been so focused on solving her problems that I'd forgotten to just love her. But I also knew that some fights are worth having, even when the person you're fighting for thinks they're not worth it. Tuesday morning brought the call that changed everything, though not in the way I expected. Marcus Webb, the private investigator Carl had recommended, reached me at 7 a.m. with news that made me nearly drop my coffee. Josh, I found them, he said without preamble. 3 other victims of David Morrison's schemes, and one of them has been documenting everything for 2 years. What do you mean, documenting everything? I mean Rachel Martinez, who owns a small accounting firm downtown, has been building a case against David since he tried to involve her in what she suspected was money laundering. She's got records, recordings, even photographs of documents he showed her. My heart started racing. Recordings? Audio recordings of David describing how he moves money through multiple accounts to hide the source. Rachel's sharp. She knew something was off and started recording their meetings for her own protection. Are the recordings legal? Completely. Single-party consent state, and she was protecting herself from potential fraud charges. Rachel's been trying to get other victims to come forward, but most people are too embarrassed or scared. What changed? I told her about Donna's case, about Tom being blamed posthumously for David's crimes. That made her angry enough to share everything. Marcus arranged for us to meet Rachel that afternoon. I spent the morning pacing my apartment, fighting the urge to call Donna immediately. This could be the breakthrough we needed. But I remembered what Carl had said about fighting smart instead of just charging in. Rachel Martinez turned out to be a woman in her early 40s with the sharp eyes of someone who'd learned not to trust financial schemes that seemed too good to be true. She met us at Sandra Walsh's office, carrying a briefcase that looked like it could contain nuclear launch codes. David Morrison is a sociopath, she said without preamble, setting the briefcase on Sandra's conference table. He's been running variations of this scam for years, targeting small business owners and recently widowed women. Recently widowed women? Sandra asked. It's his specialty. He befriends them, gains their trust, then involves their deceased husbands in financial schemes that make it impossible for the widows to defend themselves. Rachel opened her briefcase, revealing meticulously organized files. I have documentation of at least 4 cases where he's done exactly what he's doing to Mrs. Kellerman. She spread out financial records, photographs, and a small digital recorder. This recording is from 18 months ago. David was trying to convince me to help him create false documentation, showing that a recently deceased client had borrowed money from David's company. Sandra's eyes lit up. Play it. David Morrison's voice filled the room, describing in detail how he'd manipulated financial records to make it appear that dead partners had stolen money from their joint accounts. He even laughed about how the dead can't defend themselves. This is admissible? Sandra asked. Completely legal, Rachel confirmed. And I have 2 other business owners who will testify that David approached them with similar schemes. Sandra was already reaching for her phone. I'm calling David's lawyer right now. This case just became very different. While Sandra made her call, Rachel turned to me. Marcus told me about your situation with Mrs. Kellerman, about how she asked for space because she feels like a burden. Yeah. Can I give you some advice? As someone who's been fighting David Morrison for 2 years? Please. This isn't really about the money or the house. It's about her feeling like she can't trust her own judgment anymore. David's entire strategy is to make his victims doubt themselves, their relationships, their ability to make decisions. So what do? You show her she can trust herself, that her instincts about you, about your relationship, were right all along. 20 minutes later, Sandra hung up with a smile that could have powered the entire building. David's lawyer wants to meet tomorrow morning, she said. Apparently, when I mentioned we had recordings of David describing his fraud schemes, there was a very long pause, followed by a request for an emergency conference. "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means David Morrison is about to learn what it feels like to have his entire world collapse." As I drove to Donna's house, I thought about what Rachel had said. This wasn't just about solving the legal problem. It was about helping Donna trust herself again. Trust that her feelings were valid, that her judgment was sound, that asking someone to love her wasn't asking too much. I found her in her backyard, pulling weeds with the intensity of someone trying to extract every bad thought from the ground. She looked up when she heard my truck, and I saw something in her expression I couldn't quite read. "Josh," she said, straightening up and wiping dirt from her hands. "I thought we agreed." "Donna," I interrupted gently, "I need to tell you something. About David Morrison, about the case, and about us." She was quiet for a moment, studying my face. "Is this you trying to rescue me again?" "No," I said. "This is me trying to show you that you were right all along. About Tom, about the money, and about us." "What do you mean?" I told her about Rachel Martinez, about the recordings, about David's pattern of targeting widows and dead partners. I watched her face change as she processed what this meant, not just for the lawsuit, but for her understanding of everything that had happened. "So Tom really didn't steal anything," she said quietly. "Tom really didn't steal anything. Your instincts about him were right. Your instincts about us were right too." She was quiet for a long time, staring at the freshly weeded garden bed. "Josh," she said finally, "I owe you an apology." "No, you don't." "Yes, I do. I let fear make me doubt everything good in my life. I let David Morrison make me question my own judgment about the man I love." "The man you love?" She looked up at me with eyes that had found their brightness again. "Did you think asking for space meant I stopped loving you?" I wasn't sure what it meant. It meant I was scared. It meant I needed to figure out if I was strong enough to be the partner you deserve. And I realized that being strong enough doesn't mean not needing help. It means knowing when to accept it and when to give it back. She stepped closer. "I'm still 52, Josh. I still come with complications and strong opinions and a tendency to overthink everything. I'm still 38 and stubborn, and occasionally think I can fix things that can't be fixed. So where does that leave us?" "Exactly where we started," I said. "With me being crazy enough to marry you, and you being brave enough to ask." She smiled then, the first real smile I'd seen from her in days. "Ask me again," she said. "Ask you what?" "You know what?" I took her dirt-stained hands in mine. "Donna Kellerman, would you marry me? Even though you're 52 and complicated and make me want to fight dragons I don't know how to fight?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Even though you're 38 and stubborn and think you can save the world one fence at a time? Even though we've only known each other 6 weeks? Especially because we've only known each other 6 weeks and we've already survived a lawsuit together." I kissed her then, tasting strawberry lemonade and second chances and the beginning of everything we were going to build together. The settlement conference the next morning was over before it really began. David Morrison walked into Sandra's office looking like a man who'd spent the night reconsidering all his life choices. His lawyer, a sharp-suited woman who clearly wished she was anywhere else, got straight to the point. "My client would like to withdraw his lawsuit," she said, not making eye contact with anyone in the room. "I'm sorry," Sandra replied with the kind of smile that wasn't sorry at all. "But we have a countersuit to discuss first." What followed was 20 minutes of the most satisfying legal discussion I'd ever witnessed. David Morrison, it turned out, owed money to at least 6 different people he'd defrauded over the years. By the time Sandra was done outlining our case, David wasn't just withdrawing his lawsuit, he was agreeing to pay Donna $15,000 in damages and publicly clearing Tom's name. "One more thing," Sandra added as David's lawyer was packing up. "My client wants a written apology, to be published in the business journal where you first made accusations about her late husband." David looked like he might be sick, but he nodded. Later, as we sat in Donna's kitchen celebrating with the good china and the strawberry lemonade, I marveled at how different everything felt. The crisis was over. But more importantly, we'd figured out who we were both individually and together. You know what's strange? Donna said, refilling our glasses. I'm not actually relieved it's over. No? Don't get me wrong, I'm happy David got what he deserved. But the relief I feel isn't about the house or the money. It's about knowing I can trust my own judgment again. You always could. No, I couldn't. For 26 years, I let Tom make every important decision. When he died, I didn't know how to trust myself about anything. She looked at me across the table. But I trusted myself about you. Even when I was scared. Even when I thought I was being foolish, I knew what I felt was real. And now? Now I know that loving someone doesn't mean losing yourself. It means becoming more yourself. That evening, the neighbors started arriving without invitation. Jeffrey appeared with a bottle of champagne, claiming he'd been saving it for a special occasion. Maxine brought homemade cookies and what she called celebration gossip about David Morrison's reputation being ruined around town. Even Mrs. Chen showed up with Harold in tow, carrying a casserole that smelled like heaven. Heard you got engaged, Mrs. Chen said without preamble. About time. How did you? I started. Maxine, everyone said in unison. Information travels. Fast on Sycamore Lane, Jeffrey added. Also, you two were having your romantic reunion in the backyard. Sound carries. Carl arrived last, carrying a bottle of beer and a small wrapped box. Engagement present, he said, handing it to Donna. Inside was a small wooden sign that read the Kellerman Morrison House. Underneath, in smaller letters, where fences get fixed and hearts get mended. Carl, Donna said, her eyes filling with tears. Did you make this? He shrugged, which in Carl speak meant yes, and also that he was embarrassed by the sentiment. It's perfect, she said, standing up to hug him. Carl turned bright red but hugged her back. As the evening wound down and the neighbors gradually drifted home, Donna and I found ourselves alone on her back porch, watching fireflies and planning a future that felt both thrilling and wonderfully normal. So, she said, when should we do this marriage thing? When do you want to do it? Tomorrow? Next week? I don't want a big wedding, Josh. I want a real marriage. What's the difference? A big wedding is about the day. A real marriage is about all the days after. I thought, about that. How about next month? Small ceremony, just family and the neighbors who helped us through this mess? In the backyard? Where else? It's where you asked me to marry you. She leaned against me, and I realized that this quiet moment of planning our life together was what I'd been looking for without knowing it. Josh? Yeah? I love you. Not because you saved me or fixed my problems. I love you because you make me want to be brave enough to ask impossible questions. I love you too, because you asked the impossible question in the first place. Above us, the stars were coming out, and somewhere in the distance, someone was playing jazz piano. It sounded like the beginning of everything. 3 months later, I was back on Sycamore Lane, but this time I wasn't fixing a fence. I was getting married in the backyard where it all began. The ceremony was small, just like Donna wanted. Jenny stood as her maid of honor, crying happy tears into a tissue that Carl had thoughtfully provided. My mother, who had driven in from 2 hours away, kept whispering to anyone who would listen that she'd known all along I'd find the right woman when I stopped looking so hard. Jeffrey officiated, having gotten ordained online specifically for the occasion. I've watched these two from my tomato garden, he said to our gathered friends and family. And I can tell you that what they have is the real thing. They've already survived their first major crisis, which means they're prepared for about 40 years of minor ones. Maxine had appointed herself wedding coordinator, which meant everything ran with military precision and everyone knew exactly where they were supposed to be at all times. Mrs. Chen had made enough food to feed the entire neighborhood, which was good because the entire neighborhood had shown up. Carl's wedding gift was a new fence, this one with a small gate between Donna's yard and Jeffrey's, because as he explained, good neighbors should have easy access for emergencies and borrowed garden tools. But the best moment came during the vows, when Donna looked at me with those summer sky eyes and said, Josh, you asked me what kind of lemonade goes with strawberry lemonade. The answer is, whatever kind we make together. I laughed, because Of course, she'd remember that line from our first real conversation. Donna, I said, you asked me if I'd marry someone who was 52. The answer is, as the evening wound down and the neighbors gradually drifted home, Donna and I found ourselves alone on her back porch, watching fireflies and planning a future that felt both thrilling and wonderfully normal. So, she said, when should we do this marriage thing? When do you want to do it? Tomorrow? Next week? I don't want a big wedding, Josh. I want a real marriage. What's the difference? A big wedding is about the day. A real marriage is about all the days after. I thought, about that. How about next month? Small ceremony, just family and the neighbors who helped us through this mess? In the backyard? Where else? It's where you asked me to marry you. She leaned against me, and I realized that this quiet moment of planning our life together was what I'd been looking for without knowing it. Josh? Yeah? I love you. Not because you saved me or fixed my problems. I love you because you make me want to be brave enough to ask impossible questions. I love you too, because you asked the impossible question in the first place. Above us, the stars were coming out, and somewhere in the distance, someone was playing jazz piano. It sounded like the beginning of everything. 3 months later, I was back on Sycamore Lane, but this time I wasn't fixing a fence. I was getting married in the backyard where it all began. The ceremony was small, just like Donna wanted. Jenny stood as her maid of honor, crying happy tears into a tissue that Carl had thoughtfully provided. My mother, who had driven in from 2 hours away, kept whispering to anyone who would listen that she'd known all along I'd find the right woman when I stopped looking so hard. Jeffrey officiated, having gotten ordained online specifically for the occasion. I've watched these two from my tomato garden, he said to our gathered friends and family. And I can tell you that what they have is the real. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.